hair, the clothing, the leg warmers, and ninjas. The 80s, when the ninja was at the height of its popularity. Tons of ninja movies, ninja games, ninja-themed cartoons, ninja-based characters in some cartoons. I even dressed up as a ninja for 2 years in a row. So it's not surprising that one of my favorite action arcades during that time was Shinobi. But I can't just talk about one without wanting to cover the sequels, because they each bring to the table something new and offer a revolutionary look at how the series matured throughout the years. Just a quick note, there are a bunch of Shinobi titles out there, I know, but I'm only going to be covering Shinobi, Revenge of Shinobi, and Shinobi 3 in this video. Now you might ask yourself, why not Shadow Dancer? Now this is my personal take on Shadow Dancer. It falls into the same situation Wonder Boy 3 fell under, where there was an arcade port and a separate and very different console port almost simultaneously, but both took different paths. I feel Revenge of Shinobi and Shadow Dancer are both sequels to the 87 arcade, but from different points of view. Also, I exclude Shinobi Legions from this video since I do not consider it to be a true continuation of Shinobi 3 since you no longer play as Joe Musashi. But fear not, I'm going to cover the rest of the Shinobi series sometime down the road. Anyway, let's start. First, a little background. The Shinobi series is a Sega-owned franchise that started in 1987. It was developed by Sega AM1, which is a department within Sega that mostly did arcade games in the early days. With the ninja craze of the time, Sega would have been stupid to not have taken advantage of that. They had under their belt the System 16 arcade board, which would be used to produce some great arcade hits such as Altered Beast and Golden Axe as well. Shinobi puts the player in control of Joe Musashi, a ninja that is hell-bent on stopping some sort of criminal organization that goes by the name Zed, after they kidnap children belonging to members of his ninja clan. As a kid playing this one in the arcades, I did not have a chance to look at the backstory to the game, so I was just wondering, why are these people kidnapping children, and why are these children who were tied up have swords on their backs? Also, the intro has what I assume to be Joe Musashi, but in a ninja headgear, yet when the game starts, he has no hoodie. Now, what kind of ninja is this guy anyway? The kind that kicks ass. The game consists of 5 levels, all of them broken up into different sections with a boss awaiting at the end of each one. This is a one-hit kill game. It's an arcade, so no surprise there. Although you can bump into enemies and get knocked back as well, but they get pushed back too, and you can use this move strategically to get past some tricky spots. Joe can also take a swipe with a sword or just punch the living daylights out of an enemy if close enough. I love doing that. You are required to save all the children to advance to the next stage, with one of those kids offering a power-up. Joe upgrades to a gun, a ninja with a gun. Whatever, let's move on. Which allows a stronger shot which takes out enemies quickly, and unfortunately, these power-ups, they do not carry over to the next section. You also have ninja magic. You get 1 per section, but you can collect more if found. The game was produced by Yutaka Sugano with music composed by Yasuhiro Kawakami. I point this out since the music in the Shinobi series has been a stellar companion to the great gameplay. The arcade marked by fascination with in-game music that is carried on to this day. The level designs were not out of this world, but some used different planes to give the sense of a depth in a 2D game. And I always love seeing the Marilyn Monroe pictures in the background here, and even Spider-Man makes an appearance. Not once, not twice, but thrice. The cool thing was that this would not mark the end of Spider-Man in the Shinobi universe. More on that later in the video. The ability to jump behind the scenery in level 2 was also a little nice touch feature that was not seen in those days very often and would actually be used again in the series. But this is what I meant when I mentioned putting a sense of depth in a game that is 2D. The end bosses were very creative. You have to remember, this is 1987, so you can't expect mind-blowing Metal Slug 3 type graphics here. But the game developers, I think, came up with some pretty cool end bosses using the technology that they had in front of them, considering each one was so completely different from one another that you had no idea what to expect. And that added a level of suspense to it all, which was just what you wanted out of an arcade game if you were a game developer. On top of all the cool stages, the bosses, the enemies, you had a pretty cool, for its time, bonus stage where ninjas would run from side to side of the screen inside a dojo as they try to jump towards you to end the bonus stage. If you managed to get them all, you were awarded 1 extra life, and I couldn't accomplish that during my gameplay here. I never got past this one here in the arcades. I gave up by the time I got here, plus I was down to a few dollars left of change, and there were so many other arcade games to play. The game would be ported over to many different platforms, even the Nintendo Entertainment System as an unlicensed port by Tengen. The Master System port was the one that I used to play at my friend's house, and where I managed to beat it, finally. It helped that it had a health bar as opposed to that one-hit kill mechanic the arcade had. Plus the graphics on it, they were not that bad, considering you were going down to an 8-bit port. You could also upgrade your health bar and use bonus rounds to collect more ninja magic. All in all, it was a decent game. The NES port, on the other hand, look at it. I cannot begin to properly put into words the fear that engulfs my very soul as I stare into the title screen. Then to play it and have that very soul ripped out of your body? Oh man, damn you, Tengen. Interesting note here is that the Master System port version was one of the 5 games that Sega had agreed to port to the Atari Jaguar after a court battle ended with them agreeing to do this as part of a settlement. Of course, now we know that the game was never made as the Jaguar was just decimated in the early 90s video gaming landscape. Can you imagine a Shinobi game on the Jaguar? Oh. Revenge of Shinobi was released in December of 1989. The story for this one takes place 3 years after the events of the first Shinobi title, with Zed returning now as Neo Zed and murdering Joe Musashi's master and then kidnapping his bride, Naoko. Joe sets out across the world as he takes his revenge on the Zed.
Excuse me, Neo Zed.
Oh, my bad. Neo Zed. Whatever.
Thanks.
So if you pay close attention in the map and the stages, they are laid out in a way that makes sense actually. Joe starts out at his dojo, makes his way past the waterfalls into the city before arriving at the airport. He then boards a plane to the US where he starts off in Detroit, travels to San Francisco before ending up in Chinatown. He then travels to a port somewhere in upper northeastern USA, and eventually the Zed hideout somewhere off that same coast in the US. Revenge of Shinobi was one of the first games that I saw and played for the Sega Genesis after school at a friend's house just shortly after it's released here in the US. And it blew my mind on so many levels. If this was what 16-bit was gonna give us gamers for a home console experience, I was all in. I mean, think about it. You went from this right here, and may God help us all, this one, to this. And it was evident that the 16-bit hype was all too real, and I must get a Genesis immediately. Then I went and bought a TurboGrafx 16. Go watch that video. The stages are a thing of beauty, with them being different from one another and providing some set of difficulty that proves to be ingenious in its design. The game immediately lets you know this just by the way that the first level is laid out, with level 2 forcing you to get knowledgeable with how ninja magic is needed in certain portions of the game. Here's the portion of an interview with Noriyoshi Oba, one of the developers of this amazing game. On the technical side, since this was going to be the new Mega Drive hardware, we wanted to use as much parallax scrolling as we could. We wanted every stage, if possible, to have over 3 layers of background scrolling. Our idea was to come up with a style of gameplay that actually made use of those multiple backgrounds. We had this feeling that with Revenge of Shinobi, we wanted to upturn America's traditional image of Japan. But we didn't want to simply port the arcade version of Shinobi. We wanted to do something completely different. The reason why is that the console games have their own playstyle, distinct from the arcade games. You have a health meter here that can be upgraded by finding certain power-ups in the game, all hidden too. You can also find additional magic and power-ups to help you along the way. The magic system here was a vast improvement from the arcade one. There are now 4 ninja magics, known as Kujin. Again, here is an excerpt from that same interview with Noriyoshi regarding this new implementation. If you get better and can advance using only your sword, the game will get easier, because you'll be able to stock shurikens and use them on enemies you find hard. For players who aren't very good though and still want to get further in the game, the fire shurikens are there for them to use. I created them as a first line of defense for such players. Then as a second backup, for players who are still having problems, I created the ninjutsu. If the shurikens weren't enough, players can try the lightning or fire magic. Finally, as a last desperate measure, there's the Mijin ninjutsu. That was the order I had in mind when I balanced the game. The ability to set the shurikens to infinite was just a little bonus I threw in. We can call it an emergency intervention. I won't lie here, I never played the game again without the shuriken cheat once I read about it in a game magazine, and I think it was EGM. Could be wrong though. But I highly recommend playing it with no cheat to get a full appreciation of the game and the difficulty set in place by the developers. I can't go on gushing about this title and not talk about the music. Yuzo Koshiro needs no introduction as one of the best music composers of the gaming world, ever, period. He had been working for Neon Falcon for a while before starting doing freelance work in the mid to late 80s. He came to Sega and did some amazing work in this game right here by composing the entire soundtrack, and oh man, what a soundtrack. This is one of the first games I ever obsessed about when it came to the music. The first Genesis models, for those out there that might not have seen it or remember, used to have a headphone jack in the front with a volume slider. And I used to plug in my headphones and just listen to the soundtrack over and over again as I sat over at my friend's house drawing or just reading over gaming magazines well into the night. Oh man, good times. One time I even played through Batman on the NES and had the Genesis plugged in nearby with the game on and listening to the Shinobi music on my headphones as I played Batman. Yeah, that's how much I liked it. Apparently the developers of Shinobi had a great time working with him. Yep, it's really a collection of some of his most famous songs. The Chinatown stage theme in particular is amazing. I remember getting goosebumps when, during the development, I listened to the demo tape of the Chinatown theme for the first time. I was impressed by his work, and we worked well together. So I asked him to do music for the Streets of Rage the following year. Good call there. Now, one of the biggest things that you're gonna notice in the game, other than the awesome gameplay and the music, are the bosses. Here's another small clip from that same interview. I made some rough sketches of characters from my mind and from some photos due to my lack of drawing ability. They were meant to be used as a rough example. Unfortunately, the designer of the sprites, Warama, reproduced my drawings a bit too faithfully, and you know the end result. I personally think that if the designer had tried to show more of his own personality in those characters, they would have looked a lot different to the originals. The characters in question are the following: this dude right here that looks like Rambo, the Terminator, Batman, and Spider-Man. And finally, let's not forget Godzilla. This game would go on several revisions as licensing rights to characters like Spider-Man would expire while others were just dripping with the possibility of a lawsuit. Revision 1 did away with Rambo and made him bald. Why bald? That just doesn't look good. Why not just change the hair color or texture? It also changed the level 6 boss to actually resemble Spider-Man more accurately. This was actually the opposite of what the revisions would do for the majority of the characters. Batman changed to look more like a demon creature.
Who are you working for?
Yeah, kind of like that. The Bat also changed a bit to avoid a lawsuit from bats. And finally, the title screen had the copyright text added to show the copyright info for Spider-Man and Yu Koshiro. Revision 3 removed the trademark from the title screen and also had Godzilla changed to a dinosaur with no skin, as well as his fire breath changing from orange to blue. Wait a minute, shouldn't it have been left orange since Godzilla's fire breath is blue? Spider-Man was changed to resemble Bubblegum Man? What the hell? That's horrible. You know, I'm glad this was not my first exposure to Revenge of Shinobi. Hell, I'm glad I have never played this revision, period. So the last version released in the Virtual Console did away with the Spider-Man copyright test at the beginning, but the biggest change here is the iconic title screen face of Shinobi. The face was modeled after actor Sonny Chiba. So when I saw this pic of the show Kage no Gundan from 1980, I was just blown away. I had no idea after all these years that the iconic title screen was just a carbon copy of this actor and the show. The stuff you learn when you start deep diving into stuff. Well, that screenshot was changed. Yup, it was changed to this. Horrible. I'm sorry. It looks like Joe Musashi is, I don't know, questioning some of his choices in life. In actuality, this is Tsuyoshi Matsuoka, a programmer of M2. Obviously, this was done to avoid possible lawsuits upon the re-release of the game, but let's face it, and no disrespect to Matsuoka here, it's like Joe is pondering here. Man, did I let a good chance slip away by not opening that sushi bar and joining this ninja clan instead? The version I played back in the day had all the characters intact, meaning it had Godzilla and Batman and all those other characters, and as a kid, I was just blown away. I thought that was so cool to have all those characters in one game, and I always thought to myself that this was because there would be a Shinobi movie at some point in time down the road. Oh yeah, the TV show. Regardless of what version that you come across, this title right here is very dear to my heart, and I cannot recommend it enough. Whether it's retro gamers or new gamers in general. To me at least, it is a much more refined entry with really good tight controls and all aspects of its design so meticulously crafted to work with one another that it edges out Part 3 for me, but only by a bit. Speaking of Part 3, Shinobi 3: The Return of the Ninja Master was released for the Genesis in 1993, after being delayed due to Sega management not being happy with the original game. There is a way to play the prototype which can be found online if you're curious enough to pursue it. The story here is that Zed is...
Excuse me.
What?
Neo.
Neo Zed has returned after Joe Musashi had taken them down a couple of years ago. The newly appointed Ninja Master must now come out of seclusion and once again take down the criminal organization. There are a total of 7 levels and each, once again, are broken into sections, followed by an end boss. Some of them even have mini-bosses. Joe returns with a few new tricks up his sleeve though. His double jump and multiple shurikens moves are still there, but now he can dash and strike at enemies, a new wall jump, the ability to hang on to ceilings and other surfaces to get past chasms and openings, and a jump kick attack. You can also hold down the B button to place your sword in a defensive position, which can block projectiles. Revenge of Shinobi also had this move, but it was more of a passive defensive position that you can acquire after you picked up a power-up block, and it only worked if you were moving. His ninja magic returns the same as before, although with a slight change in some of the animations when activating them. Some levels will also have Joe riding a horse or on top of a jet ski. A change of pace that I found to be not only placed there for showing, but fits into the game well and gives the player a new method of experiencing a level that was not seen in the series up to that point. The game is an obvious improvement in almost every sense of the word. Joe's character gets a whole slew of new animations added, making him feel more fluent when moving and jumping about. And if you didn't feel like a ninja before, you did now. Aside from the new levels with the horse and jet ski, you get all sorts of new locations that really make good use of the Genesis color palette and parallax scrolling capabilities. Vibrant colors and lush outside locations all lend to one of the best looking Shinobi titles up to that point. Except for the water here. It looks bad, I'm sorry. Now for some reason the programmers could not get around the hurdle of the Genesis not being able to properly do transparency. The water might look very static here in the previous title, but I would take that over this right here any day. So while Joe brought along a slew of new moves, the controls never felt like they hindered you, but worked well in helping you maneuver through them in all the tight situations. The bosses were very well detailed and each one more distinct than the other. I love the boss here in stage 3, really cool looking. So while Revenge of Shinobi used several characters from popular franchises as inspirations, Shinobi 3 took a different approach that worked well in showcasing what a crazy world Joe Musashi must traverse as he fights the Seed organization. Hey look, even Robosaurus makes a return. Take that, Toho lawyers. Sometimes you would even have to contend with a few mini-bosses here and there, so you couldn't let your guard down. And whatever damage you took, you carried over to the next stage. The one thing here that I do appreciate is the very long health bar, although some enemies will really take a chunk out of it and before you know it, you're gone. There are hearts, however, scattered about to help replenish some or all of your power, as well as power-ups and extra lives. The bombs also make a comeback, and at one level they are a huge headache to deal with since they dictate which path on that level that you're gonna take or which one it takes away. I hated this level. The one reason that this game right here takes a backseat to Revenge of Shinobi is the music. The music here is composed by, and they are good tunes, don't get me wrong, and they go well with the theme and the game overall. It is undeniably a step backwards though when compared to the heavy pop synth rock and club style tunes that Yuzo Koshiro brought to the table. It is something that I could not ignore when I played it, especially after hearing the soundtracks almost back to back as I made this video and played through the games once again after so many years. It is still a great soundtrack though, but it's not Revenge of Shinobi, sorry. I actually never played Shinobi 3 on the Genesis. By the time it came out, the fighting one-on-one genre was all the rage, and the ninja craze that had been all the buzz in the 80s had dwindled down. I did eventually play the game years later though, on the Genesis emulator. Anybody remember that? Genesis? Which was popular at the time. And back then, I don't know what blew my mind more, playing Shinobi 3 or that there was an emulator that was capable of playing Shinobi 3 and almost all Genesis game ROMs. Shinobi 3 comes off for me, at least, as a game where the vast new set of moves that Joe has lends to that ninja experience much better than its predecessors, yet for some reason, there is something that holds it back from me from being my favorite of the three. The music, I would think, is one of those big factors. It's still a remarkable game with some of the most ingenious level designs and action platforming that you're gonna find on the Genesis or pretty much anywhere else for that matter. While some might claim that Ninja Gaiden for the NES was much better, and a faster action-paced ninja-themed game. The Shinobi series took a different approach, however. It was a slower-paced action platformer, where enemies came at you but not at that fast neck-breaking speed as the Gaiden series. There was no cinematics here, the atmosphere was told through the gameplay, the locations, and most importantly, the music. The Shinobi series, to me, at least the first 3 of them, are some of the best action platformers of that era. They are a blueprint for all future game developers on how to properly create a well-designed action game that puts you smack in the middle of some very interesting locations. There was something really cool about jumping atop of logs and waterfalls and then finding yourself on top of a speeding subway, fighting off bad guys as people went about their business below you. This also worked well with the whole ninja angle to it if you think about it. Knowing you were there protecting others, yet being inconspicuous at the same time. This all made it seem more real, like it wasn't just you and the enemies inhabiting this world. There were other people around you as you fought this organization. The arcade is still a title that I play from time to time since it's a short game but has a high degree of difficulty, and I always go back to Revenge of Shinobi for the experience and the music. I will agree that there is definitely nostalgia there when I regard Part 2 as my favorite. It had a huge impact on me as my introduction to the 16-bit era, and then the countless, and I'm talking countless hours I would spend just listening to the soundtrack as my friend and I spent time drawing or doing some other game-related things. The series in general has been dormant now for over a decade? And the last title came out in 2011 on the 3DS. Think about that, how weird that the last Shinobi title, which was created by Sega, was last seen on a Nintendo console. Boy, if you had told me that back in the day, I would have called you crazy. Now I wonder if Sega has any plans for Shinobi in the coming years. You know what, I hope so. Oh, and Sega, if you do, bring back Yuzo Koshiro, please. Until then, keep watching, keep gaming, and as always, take care of yourself.
So, in conclusion, I would like this Gaming Quarterly channel shut down, completely deplatformed, after he has repeatedly shown little regard for our organization by refusing to call us by our proper title, Neo-Zed. Sincerely, no wait. With loving regards, Neo-Zed.